I'm Joanna Pierre-Neves, your host, and this is Exhibitionistas. I'm an independent writer and curator with a wide-ranging 2-decade career in contemporary art, from commercial galleries to art fairs, from research to curating, from Lisbon to London, through Paris. But when I'm asked what I do outside the art world, the inevitable reaction is, oh, I don't know anything about contemporary art. Ouch. So call it a midlife crisis, call it arrogance, but I gave myself the task of trying to fill that gap with co-host conversation episodes centered around a genuine exchange of thoughts, feelings, and precious context around solo exhibitions, interviews, and special episodes based on a particular topic to keep you alert and on your toes. If you want to read further into some of the topics discussed in the episodes and more, you can also find me on Substack under my name, Joanna Pierre-Neves. This is an episode where we discuss the work of an artist through their solo exhibition, and today we're talking about artist Giuseppe Penone. So in the first part, I will take you and my co-hosts through his career, and after the break you get to visit the exhibition with us. You can go on Spotify or YouTube for video, or you can go to our Instagram account where I usually post clips of my exhibition visits and also share exhibition views. There's also some cat interruption clips, and if you don't know what that is, I really urge you to go and check them out. Our newsletter is also worth signing up for. You can go to exhibitionistaspodcast.com on our homepage and you'll know what the next episode is going to be about. You can get reading suggestions, some facts about exhibition spaces, and much more. So, as I said, the artist we were talking about today is Giuseppe Penone and his exhibition, Thoughts in the Roots. My co-host today is a newcomer. He is the first full-blown established artist that we have in the podcast. His name is Diogo Pimentel. He's an innovator in the field of drawing, and he takes it to video, performance, and volume, and much more. But for full disclosure, I also have to tell you that he is my husband. So we're ready to talk about the exhibition. Welcome to the podcast, Diogo, for the first time.
Oh, lovely to meet you.
To meet this persona. So Giuseppe Penone. I learned a lot about him. He was, well, first of all, he was born into a family of farmers. So already you can see that he's really connected to, historically even, to the soil, to the earth.
I'm so happy you're talking about that because I know the work. I'm close to some of the works, not all of it. I'm still discovering. It's incredible. He's very prolific. But I don't know much about his background. We can predict there's closeness to nature, probably raised in nature, but by all means, sorry, I just cut your...
No, I love your enthusiasm. So he was born into this family of farmers, and he grew up in the town of Garesio. So it's in the Piedmont region of Italy, so north of Italy, near the Ligurian Alps. And he was really in an area of Europe that is absolutely breathtakingly beautiful, and it has all aspects of what you can imagine Central Europe to be in terms of landscape, in terms of the elements. So you have the river. So the river traverses, I think it's the Tonno traverses.
And it's the outskirts of Alps, right? So maybe even with the mountains, all the rivers, the fresh waters, and wow. Okay.
Exactly. Fresh water, forests. So even in the city, you have the Acqua San Bernardo, which is supposedly in Italy famous for its healing properties. And also, I mean, Garesio is described as being one of the most beautiful cities of Italy. It's all stone, old buildings, old churches. And he also had a grandfather who was a sculptor. So he describes his house as being full of busts sculpted by his granddad. And his mum was also quite artistic. So from the age of 6 onward, she really encouraged him to draw. So he wasn't completely disconnected from this idea of art, because you can have this notion of him being, I mean, he's 100 kilometers south of Torino, but he is also engaged somehow with the idea of art or being an artist.
I see, introduced to it by different generation as well. Okay.
Exactly. And at 16, he was near a river, and he looked into it, and he saw those rocks, you know, those little stones inside the river, and he decided to draw each stone in that body of water. He was connecting to the singularity of each and every element, so each unity, through drawing, and also through a systematic scope of relating to something via the eye, so via observation.
It's a great story, the stone one, trying to draw each one of them. It reminds me of an aesthetic teacher at art school. He was, as a child, he was sitting down with the sea, and he was with rocks destroying seashells and with other smaller rocks as well. And then an adult came asking, what are you doing? And he said, I'm making sand. Because he realized that the sand was composed with all, you know, those little elements, broken shells. But then you look around you, you are sitting in sand, you don't need more. What are you adding to the equation? But it reminded me that's kind of impossibility.
But it will be his sand. He will have made those 3 grains of sand.
And with Penone trying to draw all that's a beautiful story.
It's a beautiful story, and it also kind of brings to mind a very romantic relation with art. So romantic / ecological. I think your friend's story is interesting as well, because I was asking myself, is he connected to Romanticism? I mean, Romanticism appeared at the end of the 18th century as this turmoil, you know, the Napoleonic Wars and the Industrial Revolution, and this need to be revolutionary and to take your destiny into your own hands when you're feeling that the world is huge, society's developing, the systems of power are dissipating and being questioned, and you're not seeing new ones arriving that are quite satisfactory. And so there was this need of like gathering your strengths and also trying to reinvent yourself, and this notion of individualistic need of rebuild something and rebuild a connection with nature.
Yeah.
Right?
It's Arte Povera. Before it happened, somehow you're already describing what they did.
Yeah, or Arte Povera is being kind of a sort of a continuation of that romanticism. First computers appearing, you know, in Torino, it was the Fiat city, but also the workers at the automobile industry were not satisfied. You know, it was the end of the 60s, 1968, all of that revolutionary sentiment coming up again. In 1966, he enrolled in the Art Academy of Torino, but he dropped out a year later. And his account of that year is that he was much more interested in the work that he was seeing in galleries there, namely the Arte Povera artists. So Gilberto Zorio, who I think for me is the dreamer, Giovanni Anselmo, and, you know, all these artists that were christened as Arte Povera artists by Germano Celant in 1967. So during that year, in an exhibition that he curated in Genoa, when Celant was 27 years old. So Celant was born in 1940. He was 27 at the time.
27.
He was 27.
Wow.
Right? That's kind of bonkers. And so Celant coined this term, and I think we can kind of like open the parenthesis here. Who was Celant? You know, who was this character? So he was a towering figure in the Italian and international art panorama as a curator and an art critic. Born in 1940, as I said, he passed away in 2020 from COVID when he was 79. That's quite sad. And his legacy, well, it's quite controversial because he was he was a character, and he was part of that group of curators, all male, mostly, who were these bigger than life, figures like Harold Zeman. Curators at the time had this kind of monolithic power. In contrast with today, where you have so many curators, you have groups of curators working together. It was kind of a patriarchal structure, that is what I'm trying to say, and I will say it.
Absolutely. No, and I do agree, and I romanticize, and I was, learning to admire that moment as well. So many artists, women artists working at the same time with them, next to them, and not mentioned.
This is also a bigger, and why the conversation of what is the role of the curator, and especially what is the role of the institutional curator? Are you there to leave your mark, or are you there to be the person who represents a whole segment of your time in terms of creativity? So Celant, Corey Anderson described him, said that he looked like Zorro. So he was also the senior curator of the Guggenheim from 1989 to 2008, and then he worked for the Prada Foundation in Milano until his death.
Celanti was with his sword making P's de Povera and not Z's from Zorro. Okay, I get it.
AP, Arte Povera. When he coined the term in 1967 and then in 1969 added Penone to the group, that didn't last for a very long time. So in the beginning of the 1970s, he sort of discarded the notion, said that it was over. And then in the 1980s, went back to it again and said, okay, this is really something that is valid in terms of a prism that you can use to look at the art that is being made today. The term is very poorly, no pun intended, chosen, because it doesn't really communicate or convey very well the idea, because it wasn't poor art. I mean, there was a lot of Carrara marble, there was a lot of industrial neon materials.
The only thing that probably they had, it was not that we considered high-end materials, it's marble and Carrara, but Carrara, it's in Italy, so for them was probably something just,
maybe cheap.
A rock from the, exactly.
Locally sourced.
Locally sourced. So that's one thing. In Arte Povera, there was this promised modernization that they were against. So they were working on this idea of anti-production. But like you said, it's dubious because some of the materials came from industry as well. It almost seems like the name was like the Impressionists, named to destroy them, and then adopted. But here was more, the name was given by the person
praising
who was
them.
Actually, seeing these things appearing.
So do you want to know how Celant
Do you know?
defined?
Okay. Oh, so you were keeping it to the end. Yes, of course.
Okay. So artworks that are taking away, so quote, taking away, eliminating, downgrading things to a minimum, impoverishing signs to reduce them to their archetypes. End of quote. So the idea of archetype, I think, is really important here. And I think he's being a bit provocative with this idea of impoverishing signs, because bringing to the archetype is really the definition of classic philosophy, which is the principle. I think with the notion of the archetype, there is something in there for Penone as well. I think. So a weird thing about Penone is that he was in Torino, discovers these artists that he was so excited by that he discarded his studies and really focused on finding out what current artists were doing. And so you would think that he would stay in Torino, but he dropped out a year into his studies and went back to Garesio, which was the foundational, archetypical, let's say, relation to art making for him. He has these 4 years or even 2 to 3 years that are incredibly prolific. So I propose to go over these 5 works that for me relate to the topic of the environment. So the mountain, the forest, which again takes me to that idea of romanticism. Then there is the other element, which is incredibly important, the tree. There are other elements in his environment other than the tree. There's the river, there's the stone, there's the leaves, there's the soil as well in some ways. But I think the tree really is, and it is in actuality the title of one of these lines of research that he continues to pursue currently. It is really this main topic for him. And then there is the body as a means of enhanced or shifted kinds of perception, which also leads me to this more ecological sense of needing to understand how the environment grows around us, how it's in constant flow, what our body can do to dissipate the indifference that's somehow this immediacy of the senses instills in us.
Once you told me that one of your favorite pieces of Penone was that idea of the body into the clay.
I remember going to the permanent exhibition of the collection at the Centre Pompidou and just having this moment with a work that was it was clay and it was human-sized and in the shape of, let's say, a drop. So it narrows at the tip, at the level of the head. So from afar, it seems like someone put their hands in the clay, in the bigger, wider body, and took apart the clay, opened it. And so the edges of that side, so the other side is round, but this side, the edges, you could see the hands grabbing the clay, and so it stayed. Of course, it's rigid. And then inside that space that was created, there's an imprint of a body that finishes at the top with the mouth. So he put his mouth on the edge, the tip of that drop of clay, and bit into it. And the sculpture, when I read the title as being Breath, transformed completely the relation to the material, which I saw as something that contains water, contains drops, bubbles of oxygen, contains carbon dioxide, contains minerals, and is in constant flow. And in some ways, it was so funny that by rigidifying the breath, it's alerted me to the flow, to that vividness of the material. So that was
true. Yeah.
So he goes back, and the first thing he does is that he goes into the environment, outdoors, nature, and he takes pictures of himself, or has someone taking pictures of several actions that he does outside. So he gathers all this series under the name of Maritime Alps. So what he does is, for example, you see a photo of him embracing a tree trunk, arms and legs around it, lifted from the ground, and then another photo next to it of the same tree trunk from the same angle with something marking the placement of his body. And I think it looks like metal wires, but I can't be sure. There's also a gridded cage that he takes into nature next to water. And it also has a bell pepper and a cauliflower sort of rigidified by cement on top of it. And then it's placed onto a tree that will sort of lift it as it grows.
That's a fantastic work.
There's a part of them that is titled Maritime Alps. It will continue to grow except at that point. And the one that I'm going to mention now is the crucial one that is very much relating or highlighting this notion of intercepting growth and interacting with it. So this is a diptych of photographs. One is Penone grabbing a tree trunk. So you see his hand and half of his forearm. And then next to it, you see a bronze cast, so a bronze sculpture of his hand. So the same thing, hand, half of the forearm, indented into the tree trunk and immobilized in it. So incorporated in the tree that is going to grow around it.
Very emblematic piece. Do you know the date?
This is between 67 and 69. The next work that I'm going to talk about is very simply called alberi. So it's trees. It means trees in Italian. And this is something that he's still pursuing. So the first group of works that I mentioned kind of served the purpose of showing how immersed he is in the natural environment. So he very regularly goes to see the same tree, to the same landscape. And so one day he's looking at a wood beam and he notices that you can see in the wood beam, so industrially cut, you can see those round-shaped, darker parts, which are the knots of the trees and the outgrowths of branches. And he understands that if he went back to that tree where his hand is, the tree will have grown past the hand, incorporating the hand. But if he were to cut the sections of growth of the tree, he would go back to that initial younger tree. And so he starts making these sculptures where he carves into these sections to get to the young tree, to the core of the tree and its outgrowths, its branches. And so what he does is that he always keeps an element of the thick wood beam or the wood section as a plinth, for example, so the lower side of it when they're vertical. They can be horizontal as well, and in that case, a lot of them have the back of the wood untouched, and the other half that is visible and turned towards us has the branches coming out of it, all sanded, all beautiful, and at times with the sap running through them. And
they say that the tree is always alive. Well, not as a tree, but as the material. It's not like a rock.
Yeah.
I'm saying that because, I don't know, I remember someone said that a tree never dies.
Francis Allais, the book about the trees that he published, and he says that certain kinds of tree never die unless they get sick. They can live forever, but it's not the case for all trees. That's not completely true. But it's true that in terms of material, and if you think about paper, which comes from trees, the paper reacts to the environment. It reacts to water, it reacts to the sun, it reacts to light. So it is a material that is incredibly porous and very, a little bit like our bodies. And I think that's why he has that very specific connection to trees. I think there's a form of identification as well. Going back to more pragmatic stuff, he shows in 1969 at the Gian Enzo Sperone Gallery in Torino. He shows these sculptures. So he has an exhibition there at the ripe age of 22, which is kind of, precocious, let's say. They are sculpted, but they are sculpted to reveal time as well.
Yes, because he takes layers of time, right? Because the tree grows through rounds and rounds and rounds of time, marking what happened. And it's a little bit like sculpting time.
Oh, a Tarkovsky reference.
I needed to introduce it at some point. Sorry.
You had to. Yeah, Tarkovsky is a massive discussion between us that we will spare you. We won't go into it. But Tarkovsky did publish a book of his thoughts and memories called Sculpting Time. And it is a heck of a title. It's a great title, right? As far as titles go.
It resonates with these tree works, but like you were saying, redefining sculpture.
But the tree is sculpting time.
Yes.
And Francis Allais in that book has something quite incredible, which is that I think it was him, provided a few architects with the material in terms of weight and in terms of quantity of a tree. And he said, can you build a tower with the same height as the tree with this material? And all architects said that they couldn't.
They couldn't, right? Wow, it's incredible.
The tree.
Yes.
So it architects itself into verticality as well.
Absolutely.
Is very much connected also to us as vertical beings.
Penone also said the sculptor must allow themselves to descend to the ground, lowering their body slowly without haste. The hand, the bronze sculpture that we call sculpture, fixed to the tree. What is the sculpture? What finishes the sculpture if not the growing of the tree around the hand as well, making us think that the hand is pressing. The hand did not press. The hand is made on a soft, holding something else, but then it's attached. And then the beautiful of the image after a few years, it's like you were saying, it's the tree that it's actually sculpting. And Penone knows that. of course, not
Yeah.
knowing the exact outcome of, what it would be, is letting the tree sculpt.
So I want to move on to another work which was also produced in 1970, which was rovesciare I propri occhi, so reversing one's eyes. Artists of this generation who are not performers particularly did perform at some point, and I think these performative gestures in artists who are not performers are even more interesting to look at because they really wanted to bring something home.
It's the work that brought me close to Penone. It was a photograph of Penone's face wearing mirrored contact lenses. Later on, I found out that it was from a performance that he did.
Wearing the mirrored lenses.
Mirrored lenses, yes.
That basically subverts what would be the use of contact lenses because it blinds the artists and reverts to the spectator what the person wearing the lenses would have been looking at. And there's even, I think in that single image, you can see the photographer on his eyes, which is really uncanny.
I saw it as also reverting not only the eyes or what he was seeing, because he's no longer seeing, he's looking inside, but it's a good way to hide. What's the best way to hide, even nowadays, right? With AI and all the security measures, with reading your eye and being able to identify you through your eye.
I don't know where you're going, but I'm interested. Okay.
So no, he was hiding himself behind those lenses somehow. Not so much. It's not so much a portrait of his beautiful face, posture, and presence, I would say. But it's about he's behind it. It's a way to work from the inside, and I think that's what actually touched me when I was a young artist producing, was this idea of almost with no action or doing almost nothing, hiding behind your own work, showing what you should be showing or what you actually look and see, because those mirrored lenses reflect the nature or what he was supposed to look at. Mm-hmm. And so it brings himself inside. I know, and you taught me that he could see a little bit through.
There were little holes in the lenses, so he wasn't completely blinded by wearing.
I didn't know that. Yeah, you taught me that. Yeah, a while ago. And it's about this membrane that separates us from the outside world and the membrane of our skin, right? That he says that it's also where we recognize ourselves. It's that membrane. It's without, from that to inside, that's where we recognize ourselves in this world, what we are as person. So it's about this connectivity, knowing that there is a separation, but also a recognition of also where we are, right?
Yes. He wore the lenses in Sperone's gallery during Hamish Fulton's exhibition. Then he did so again on October 6th of 1970 along the banks of the river Po. In February 23, in 1971, he performed in Piazza di Spagna in Rome, so meaning that he wore the lenses, in the company of Gilberto Zorio and Cy Twombly. And a few days later, on the 28th of February, he wore them on the train from Ceva to Savona. And then he wore the lenses again on the 23rd of March at the Gallery Paul Menz in Cologne, and again in May 26 at the Kunstverein in Munich, at the opening of a group show in which he participated, which was an Arte Povera show. So this really was performative. And there's also an emphasis for him on the skin, and the skin as bark for us, like the skin of the tree, and this our skin is not that different. It's an interface between the body and, like you were saying, the outside world.
And I think he becomes the sculptor. I don't know if it's a moment of realization for him or just for myself, but he becomes the sculptor.
I wanted to bring up a work that will make sense in the show as well, again from the 1970s, which is Svolgere la propria pelle, so to unroll one's skin. It is a sequence of photographs in the beginning, and then it's going to become something else. So he uses ink and transparent film of some kind. Imagine if you had Scotch tape, and then but wider, and that you would, put that Scotch tape on your cheek. Or on your nose.
But your cheek would be dirty with probably powder or graphite
or ink of
or...
some kind, and it leaves the imprint. So the ink, thank you, serves to mark that impression. Again, this is one of the things that is so important in his work, which is the imprint.
Asperities, almost like the tree, like you were saying.
Exactly.
You can't actually see it, but with that imprint system,
yes,
you see how
the pores,
the breathing, absolutely, yes.
And so he says, quote, "The skin, like the eye, is a boundary element, the end point capable of dividing and separating us from what surrounds us, the final point capable of physically enveloping enormous expanses. It is the point that allows me, still and after all, to recognize myself."
Exactly, absolutely.
End of quote. We are in the romantic subject of that unity, that singularity as humanism and education, which is that you will, through that experience, have a relation with nature that, if I were to criticize it, I find, because of this constant lookout of the archetype, sometimes I find too generic.
If you go to a big town, to Tokyo, or if you go to the forest, or mentioning the ocean where we were, both of us raised, where do you recognize yourself as well? Where do you connect, or where do you feel amazed, or where it identifies you as well as a person? It distances you, it connects you. I think he was talking about what we see, what separates us from what's the outside, what's the inside, and what's the recognition, which I think it's always important.
Yes, I think, in a phenomenological kind of way.
Phenomenological way, exactly.
I agree.
More visceral,
yeah.
Even if you are put in North Pole, which I had never been, unfortunately. But what?
Listen, we can take care of that. We can send you to the North Pole.
There's a fusion and there's an identification of yourself. There's still that layer, the skin, the eye. There's a layer where you begin and where you are others as well, alterity, and you become also the tree if you want. But you're not the tree.
So this is going to be a wealth of resources for other works. So what he's going to do with these imprints is that he's going to magnify them and then project them onto a wall and do wall drawings. He's going to do something similar with leaves, and he's going to superimpose them and sometimes retrace the veins of the leaves and produce a number of drawings from those superimpositions between the vegetable skin and the human dermis. And the principle is the fact that all these things are in motion. They're fluid, and I think air in that sense is very important to him, because there's this exchange of trees absorbing carbon dioxide and producing oxygen, us absorbing the oxygen and producing carbon dioxide, and this notion of this constant flow and cycle is one of the most important things. And his experience in the river, just to finish with the river, there's a quote of his in 89 saying, according to Socrates, in our soul is a block of wax, which is a memory, a gift of the muses. So there's other materials he's going to work with plaster, wax, glass, crystal. There's other elements that he works with, but with this idea of the malleability of the material and this connection to memory. So this connection of remembrance. And what's interesting with Socrates is This idea that you don't learn anything, you remember. It's impossible to teach humans. So the meiotic, which is literally means to give birth, and Socrates' mom was a midwife. Socrates' theory was that the role of the philosopher was to help others remember, so give birth to their own remembrance or their own ideas that they already had within them. Your body containing knowledge already. All knowledge is already contained within your body. And I think it's not a coincidence.
That makes sense.
Yeah. An important element of that sentence is that he says a gift of the muses. And I think he's talking about not your real-time memory, but philosophical knowledge. Again, we're in the archetype. So the muses, of course, here would be trees, would be the river, would be organic.
No?
Organic. No, the organic world.
I like the plane. No.
I can only do this with you, which is amazing.
No, but I agree. I totally agree. Yes, I understand.
Do you know what I
that
mean?
It's elsewhere. Yeah.
I think that's what he means. And if I may be a bit pedantic, I would also say that Sigmund Freud also uses wax as a metaphor for memory, but for the subconscious. But he uses wax in that game. Remember, there was a toy that we had when we were kids. You would draw with a stylus, then you would scrape it by dragging something that was part of the toy, part of the rectangular structure, and then you would delete the drawing.
That brings us back to your past episodes of Gerhard Richter.
I'm not getting the joke.
With the dragging and the erasing.
Yes, true. Wow, that was really phenomenal. Okay, you're cooking with gas, where I'm really trying to explain this toy that is not easy. And so going back to Freud, he said that the wax was the subconscious, because when you even out the outer layer of wax, the drawing would still be in the wax, and so your memory is a suppressed memory or a repressed memory or an unconscious memory, but it will be there, and your memory is kind of like a recording device that will never erase but will layer. And it's kind of like a layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of this wax material that kind of is malleable and therefore absorbs everything. And everything you will have gone through is there in your subconscious, in that waxy material.
It brings us back to the excavation of the trees by Penone.
I am drawing a paradox here, or a contrast here, which is that when Penone speaks of wax, he's talking about a sort of a knowledge memory, so mnemosyne, given by the muses. So a Greek reference to Socratic notions of knowledge, meaning that knowledge is already within you. You don't gain knowledge, you remember it, right? And with Freud, it's new information, and it's something that happens to you. So it's the nitty gritty, it's the little events, it's the psychological effects and percepts and affections that you have in you that make your personal story. And Penone doesn't seem concerned by that. He's in an archetypal relation to memory.
I see, yes. Penone seems like a very centered person. No,
why'd you say that?
I don't know.
He doesn't need psychoanalysis, lads.
No, he doesn't.
So what I will propose is that we go for a break and convene later when you will take us into the exhibition. See you in a bit.
See you soon.
If you're here, you're probably enjoying the episode. So if you think someone else might enjoy it too, by all means, share it. Don't forget to rate and follow Exhibitionistas. It seems trivial, but it can make a difference. All kinds of support count and contribute to more investigation and better episodes. So of course, donations and memberships through our website or on Substack are very welcome. All the links are on the show's notes, as per usual. And thank you to all of those who've taken a leap of faith and have become our patrons. From a 5-star review to a substantial donation, Exhibitionistas considers you one of those rare unicorns who support independent journalism. Now something a bit different. I'd also love to start a conversation with you. You can now leave comments on Spotify, which is a great way to know what you want more of, or if you'd like to add something to the topic developed, the artist discussed, or simply if you want to leave a note of appreciation. It's a sad world when only the trolls and the bullies interact with journalists and art critics. Let's feed the AI beast with good stuff. Why not bring positivity, ideas, and especially your own perspective to the digital art village? Okay, so we're back and we're going to go into the exhibition. But this time we are not going to push the doors of the Serpentine right away. The exhibition starts in the park. So the title of the exhibition is Thoughts in the Roots. It is on until the 7th of September, so there's lots of time to visit if you're in London. And the exhibition was co-curated by Claude Agile, Hans-Ulrich Obrist, and Alexa Chow was the assistant curator.
What attracts you from afar is this huge tree. The inside is gold, and then there is a little hill to go to it, so it's quite dramatic. And then from a distance further away you can perceive that there are more works from Penone.
Yeah.
And then you approach this tree, you see the title Thunderstruck Tree. It's a work from 2012, and for once I touched it. I had to, for some reason. It was outside, there were no barriers, it was quite inviting, and the material was quite rough. There was this tactility to the material because it was so rough, but at the same time so similar to a tree.
I'm sorry, but I'm discombobulated. You think they're trees. You touch them because you think they're trees, right? Was it not your... I mean, that was my experience.
I knew it couldn't be a tree.
How did you know?
I don't know. It was maybe by knowing it from before or approaching it, my instincts were telling me that it's not a tree. And I think it was the golden leaf on top of it that it felt to me strange to be on a tree. Outside, something happened also because going through the park with my son, we were talking about Albert.
Excuse me.
Our son.
Well, Jesus. Why am I dispossessed of my children suddenly?
I didn't want to bring your child to the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. It's just your child.
Without asking you. But mine, I can talk
you can
about
reference.
It.
Yeah.
But we were talking about Albert's memorial, and our son asked if it was real gold. Albert's sculpture, it's also bronze, gilded bronze, and then covered with gold leaf.
I was taken aback by the fact that it's not a real tree and it's bronze. And I was a bit weirded out by that. And then, so there's a second sculpture, which is a bronze tree that looks intact. So it's just the wood, let's say, of the tree. It's a leafless tree. And on the branches, you have big stones placed on the branches. But
by the way, the work is called Ideas of Stone.
Oh, it's called Ideas of Stone. Yes. And then around that tree installation, there's stones in a circle around that. I found the arrangements of stones strange. I wasn't in it.
I had a different experience. Also because it was quite dramatic somehow. 2 trees, also very strange, both of them, right? With a golden leaf on one of them, hit by a lightning. And then you look at the other sculpture from afar, there's a family or adults and children just playing around and jumping from stone to stone. That it's part of the installation. So it was accessible, but you find huge, heavy stones on top of those thin branches. But for that to happen, I sensed a flood. I've sensed for those rocks to be there, a flood bigger than those 10-meter high trees would have had to happen for these rocks to be there. And also I think for him, the stones are polished by the flow of the river. So there was the presence of the river, but for me it was more than a river. It was a strong river flood that flooded the entire tree and brought these rocks to the top, and then it went away. And then you see these children playing after the storm. Curious now to see what you felt about the inside. When you get in, immediately you see Aoki Kyuzi with eyes closed from work from 2009. And suddenly I had to turn my back to it to see what was in this wall.
So the two walls as you enter, so the two walls, so to the left and to the right, they have words stamped on them. The stamp is not a negative, it's a positive. And when you stamp, it stamps the negative version.
The stamp is the positive.
Yes.
There's two, you realize that there's two works, but only at the end. 8,046 giorni nel cielo, 8,046 days in the sky. And then you have another one called...
On the other wall.
On the other wall, 28,490 written in digits, and giorni nel cielo, and the title in English is 28,490 days in the sky. And this one was from 2025. So one from 1969 and the other one from 2000.
It's strange.
But then I've realized that those days, the 8,046 days, were the days that Penone was under the sky, alive. So he was 22 years old.
Yeah.
So he wrote all the days that he was, and then he created in 2025 another work. These stamps stopped me, and I had to look back, and suddenly you were immediately into kind of a time zone, or two time zones, and three time zones, because you were suddenly on your time zone as well. And those doors felt almost like an idea. There was kind of a portal. And it's interesting because you get into the exhibition, but then you look back. So then, after this experience, I moved to with eyes closed. You could see even better from afar that it's Penone's eyes represented with what you think it's paint or drawing, little dots. So, but then you approach and you see that those little dots, or what's marking the drawing, what's making the drawing, are very spiky acacia thorns. And then in the center you have polished white Carrara marble, also sculpted. I think it was replicating or going through the skin, or
skin
also
of the tree, or your own skin. I think it's
even the kind of the skin or the veins
or
of
the
marble veins.
I think when you read the title, you kind of go, oh, wait a minute, these were eyes. You're not quite sure. So he's not kind of like bringing it on with a force. It's like the same thing with the number of the days under the sky. It's not narcissistic.
Almost inviting you to close your eyes. It's not about what you see. And then you move to the right. You have this work called Persone e Anni. So people and years, from 2020, and it's interesting that it's from 2020 as well. Also,
when Celant died.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And the pandemic began.
It's a frottage piece, so it's a 15 meter long piece. Work. And it's a frottage, so it's all about
a rubbing,
rubbing. 2020 was, if anything, nothing about touching.
Oh yeah, true. It goes around it envelops the corner. And then continues on to another wall.
Makes a turn.
And it's kind of almost like a shroud. There's a shroud aspect to it.
Yes.
like a mortuary linen in some ways, because it's kind of wrapping the wall. You don't feel like it's hanging on the wall for you to look at.
No, yes.
It's embracing, it's covering the wall. There's something very strange. And there's also another aspect of it, which is that it has, so it's the first incidence of a scent. There's an odor. There's an odor to the piece. It's very, very intense.
It's still, I wouldn't say very, very intense, to keep the very, very intense for later. So I would say intense or very intense.
Yes. So the linen has at the center these green lines that are the rubbing of vegetable color and leaf frottage on a tree trunk.
Absolutely.
So the length of the linen is the length of the tree, and the tree's at the center, but it's horizontal. So
it's horizontal.
It goes across, so it's a lifeline almost, like a timeline almost, but you go from left to right. So it's not a readable timeline. It's reversed.
You see the piece from the right to left.
From right to left, and you read from left to right.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's a timeline, and I'm talking about text and timeline because it has text. So around the rubbing of the tree
rings, there is
there's text.
Is a line, and then another line. So he says, line by line, the volume of words wraps around the tree, adding to the description of its form, thoughts, and evocations of images, associating the meaning of words with the memories that each reader identifies for them to the word silence. Never present in nature, memory amplifies the sounds of the body, the breath that inhales oxygen, the heart that pulses and distributes blood throughout the body. So this is more about his experience in nature, being next to a tree, almost imagining the idea of a spectator or being a spectator. But he also describes, I think, something more theoretical about his conception of art. And maybe if you, I'm sending it to you, you can read it. Maybe you could read this part.
Okay. It is one of the functions of art to help us understand and amend the changes that the social body has imposed on the surrounding reality, bringing thought back to the needs of the individual, to their existence, to the sense of wonder they feel when confronted with the timeless and immutable astonishment that nature inspires, to the marvel of thought and its capacity to continuously evoke new images, emotions, discoveries, intentions, revealing and making present unexpected realities hidden between the infinitesimal dimension of the atom and the inconceivable vastness of space, without forgetting the enduring emotions that a drop of water, a river, a grain of sand, a mountain, a spark, the sun, or the moon caught between the branches of a tree can evoke. The capacity for emotion that the line of a drawing can arouse through the mysterious mechanism that provokes in us astonishment, evoking memory, is part of the inexhaustible wonder that makes a material as precious as coal or dust, placed on the sheet, reproduce the light and shadows, and reveal the thought and gaze of another who has been able to annotate by describing with spots, with marks, and by fixing emotions that remain in time and are revived every time one's gaze enters the author's thoughts, making him present.
So
this is quite the text that has no end. You enter a sentence and you just feel like you're in the river, taken by the current, and you cannot stop, and you're just taken to such differences of light and emotion and ideas, and you cannot stop and you cannot hold on to them, but somehow they're making sense to you, and it's about you in that flux of things. And then you stop and you don't exactly know what happened to you.
Yeah, exactly. Like the rings of the tree that doesn't stop. It keeps on going and going and going and going.
Yeah, this
Maybe
is
only
quite intense.
only us humans have that sense of, okay, let's stop, let's have a seat, let's grab a coffee, but it doesn't stop.
Yeah, maybe.
In
Yeah,
fact.
that is true.
Yeah, yeah.
Didn't
So
think of that.
moving on, when you discover this work, it's so long that you bump into another work, also Indistinti Confini, Renus, so Indistinct Boundaries, Renus, so it's from 2012. I've gathered that Renus was something connected to the river, so who lived by the river, the one who lived by the river, or also it's old Germanic and also Celtic would be the flow, connected to the idea of flow as well.
It's a sort of a pillar,
It's a sort of a pillar tree sculpted in marble.
and then it's covered in blue. There's a side of it that has the blue pigment or paint or whatever. It looks
Like
quite almost pagan, like a pagan ritual.
And then you look to your left because there's this smell starting to be so strong that you have to kind of address it. And then you walk to the next room and there is this nature smell. There is a smell of the idea of green, nature green smell.
Yes,
right?
of grass
of moss.
You know where the smell comes from.
I didn't. I kind of did. I didn't, because at your right hand you have Gesti Vegetali.
So when you have on the wall to the left a very, very big sort of fabric, so linen, with a green, so monochromatic drawing of branches and trees and like grass imprints, and then in front of you on the wall on the back you have again something that is a bit more figural, so you have tree trunks, it looks like a forest, but again with the same green hues.
Yes,
and then in the
darker, I would say.
Much darker.
It
has a bit of brown, and then in the center you have the most fabulastic installation with these big clay pots, huge, with a tree that seems to be planted on several of them. Some of them don't have anything, they just have soil. And then there's this bronze sculpture that seems to be just bark. So bark is kind of coming together to form a human figure.
And it's actually strange work. Also, it's the idea of sculpture that I imagine on the roundabouts.
Yes, yeah.
And
you can think of.
There is also this idea of futuristic dystopian.
It made me think of Miyazaki,
yes.
all the animation that we've watched recently.
Absolutely.
With these beings coming to life that are weirdly anthropomorphic but made of nature or natural elements.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. I've heard that this is growing, it's still growing, it's going to grow till the end of the exhibition.
I think the problem is that it doesn't fit into Penone's aesthetic. Mm-hmm. But he's been doing these sculptures since the 80s. So
yes. Outside,
it's not a recent...
Outdoor sculptures,
Absolutely.
Installation.
Absolutely at the same time.
Installation. They feel different.
Okay, so the Serpentine is built in a way where there's a central area that is big, and it's usually kind of the hitting point of the exhibition, let's say.
What did you feel? So the smell continues but changes, right?
Yes.
The walls
are still very odorous. Yeah.
Right. The walls are covered with laurel leaves.
Yes, laurel leaves.
Leaves.
It's a very strange building that has, I think, 1 or 2 windows almost below the ceiling.
Really?
And the leaves go up to mid-window, which makes you... It's the first time I was in that room and was made to look upward, and it looks like a church. It literally looks like... And it has this central window. And you're also kind of grabbed by that scent of the laurel leaves.
Absolutely.
They are in boxes. I mean, not in boxes, but in...
The leaves are, yes, in a net.
It's sort of a gridded net. Yeah,
gridded.
Sort of net in little elements. So in unity... So in boxes that then have this grid that holds them. So they're not... So the walls are not paved with leaves. They are... You hang these boxes on the wall that create as if it was a mosaic that covered, but it's not a mosaic. It's just the structure and the pattern that is mosaic-like
Absolutely, yes.
and contains leaves.
This work is called Respirare l'ombra, to breathe the shadow.
But it has another element.
So then there is this element also on the center wall, on opposite to another work that we will talk about. But
Yes.
when you turn left, you see this terracotta, this clay sculpture, a molded face with a mouth open, where as if we were inside a body. So the bronze that goes through the mouth looks like a branch, and then when it goes inside, it divides into two branches with leaves. And I think that I believe, and it is what it is, I think it represents the lungs,
Right.
the breathing.
Yes.
Because also it goes through the mouth and divides into two when it's inside. The face, we don't see the nose unless we get really close.
Because the face is turning towards the wall.
Towards the wall.
So
And
you see an empty skull, like a
Yes.
mask.
Yes.
And then the branch that goes through the mouth, but you see it from behind, so you don't see the face. So you're making me think that actually it's as if when you're in the space, you were in the internal part of your body. It's like it's a body and the leaves are the air because
Yes.
it's the scent. So you sense the scent through the nose, so it's carried by the air. Then you have that face and you have the lungs, and it's as if you were inside your body. And then in the back you have the other work, which is also the inside of the tree. So there's something about being in an internal side of an organism that is receiving air, it's receiving scent, it's exchanging the carbon dioxide
Absolutely.
for oxygen or vice versa. And so there's this idea, it's a very strong room.
It has been shown several times in different occasions. Sometimes it has more than one sculpture.
Facing that sculpture, this is a whole installation, and then there's the wall on the other side that has another sculpture.
Yes, it's the book trees, and it's from 2017. It's those sculptures that we know from Penone, where he gets the knots and goes inside and discovers the younger tree. And it's very long, so it's one tree next to the other, so it's probably 3 to 4 meters high. Trees are carved like open books. There is an angle
Yes,
on the side, right? Like you had an open book in your hand.
that's true. I
And they're
hadn't
next to
noticed
each-
that.
Yes, I really felt that, and you could see also it was nice because it could reveal the knot. You could see the knots on the side, and where the way he went in to get the branches and to the younger tree inside. They're next to each other. It's 12, so it's quite big installation. You could see also that it's not like cutting the tree with a robotic machine, or it's really
An industrial tool or a
tool
mechanical,
that would computer, and you could actually see that it's sometimes
the carving.
the carving is it has
Yeah.
its own, it thickens or it thins the branches, but it's almost like a drawing again. It shows a direction. It shows the direction of the growth also, and this idea of open book as well, because these trees and the branches, the way they go to the left, to the right, up and down. It's to balance the tree as well. It's to respond to the elements, to the storms around it, balance winds and gravity, probably diseases.
They're standing on, they're held by a big beam that is untreated. That is not sculpted.
Yes.
So that potentially could contain one of them trees. And there's 3 types of tree. I like that he kept that beam. That looks quite rough. It's not a beautiful thing to look at. And I like that because you say, oh, it's carved manually, but the beams are cut industrially. He's not like saving the tree because he kept the other beam underneath, and he's accepting the industrial condition as well. He's not like, let's go back to the trees, or he takes planes, he has an iPhone, so he's a modern person. He's not retired from, civilization, as it were, industrialization. and technology. He's talking about the book. So again, there's always this notion of knowledge and idea and philosophy, but there's also this thing of acceptance, I find.
And also, I felt the survival of time and this protection. And those trees lived many, many years, and they were outside for many, many years. And with books, it's the same. There is this idea of survival of time. So then you, from this huge like installation, you go to another room where light comes, natural light comes again. You can see the park and the reflection on the floor from the outside. And you discover this work, again, a pot and a tree, but there is a portrait of Penone printed on porcelain.
It's ceramic, yeah.
It's ceramic on ceramic. And then again, the eyes are pierced by branches. I quite like this work. I don't know what you felt about it, or if it was something that you retained as a strong work.
I loved it.
Okay.
I loved it. I really love that work. I think it's one of my favorites because the ceramic is so unexpected. You think it's a photograph. And I thought, what a great idea to have a photograph, such a simple, and also kind of making me think of his beginnings. Obviously, it's a reference to the eyes reversed piece with the mirror lenses.
Absolutely.
But then you see it's ceramic. And you think, because he has a few sculptures that are vases that I didn't talk about, he has thought about the container, the idea of the container. But it's very subtle. It's a very simple kind of work. And suddenly you have a face. I think it's a work that is the most mysterious one. It's the most timeless to me. A few of these works feel a bit dated to me. Whereas this one, I think it could have been made in the 50s. It could be made in the future. I think it's a very audacious work. I think I like it also because it's the only one where I see a bit of darkness and a bit of tragedy or something other than just an archetypal relation with the material that is not specific. Because in the room that I so loved, I was also thinking, does he use the laurel trees, the laurel leaves, because of their healing properties, their anti-inflammatory? Is it something that he's interested in? I was kind of trying to see if he was going to be more specific, because laurel leaves are also the leaves that you use to crown the poet.
Absolutely.
Right? Nowadays you would think, I'm looking into something that I have this wealth of knowledge that his mama, his nonna probably had, about these specimens. And again, I feel that some of his work doesn't resonate with my needs now when you're talking about the biosphere. At the moment, I feel I need something different. I need something more. And that's maybe how I would perhaps end the discussion about the exhibition. Is I loved going. I would probably go again. I will, most likely. But because I need to be in touch with that sensitivity and that full engagement that he has. But there's limitations to even comparing with Mary Miss or Patricia Johnson. I mean, other artists who were ecological artists and who were working with the awareness of the impact we have as humans. And I feel like he creates a sort of a bubble where you can forget about the impact that humans have on our own future. And I think that's where you can reconnect with him. He's saying, like, these guys are gonna stay. These trees, you may destroy a few specimens, but they're gonna stay after you're gone. So that's why I love the exhibition. I love his work. It's just that at a certain time, when I see gridded leaves, I'm like, there's a part of me was like, symbolically, they're a bit trapped, and I'm not sure that's what he's trying to do. He's just trying to create a way of making a wall of leaves. But then you get to that piece and you get a form of darkness. Something about this body is going to be eaten up
a freshness as well, but a darkness, I understand. Yes.
Yeah.
But then in the same room you have pressione. Pressure.
Yes.
And then the one, what's the title? Sophie Di Fogli. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Breath of Leaves. It's quite
Which is
emblematic.
fantastic.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I knew you were going to, of course,
I love
it, and it's a strong work. I thought in the beginning that I would always imagine that he would jump and fall in those leaves. So you see leaves on the floor with a very, very organic shape, or just left there on when you are cleaning your garden, and then you put the leaves together with a very irregular shape. Okay, you're right.
And they're organized in a sort of a heap that is flattened by something. There's a trace of something.
There's a trace of something, yes, definitely.
He lies on the heap of leaves, and he blows.
He breathes in and out, I would say.
Or maybe, he breathes in and out.
He breathes with the leaves into the leaves.
Yes.
I always, even knowing the work, I always imagined since the beginning and even now that he would jump to the work. He would fall
at 77.
Into, I don't know. Maybe.
Why not?
Exactly.
Why not? It could.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be him. The concept is great, and it's there. It could be an assistant. It could be an invitation for us to do it as well. I would say that piece could now go a bit further as well, and maybe be open to a more collaborative experience, and repeat the gesture could be quite nice. But it's, of course, it's,
for me personally, that part of the exhibition was really nice with the final work, which is Pressure.
It's part of the skin work reversed with tape, but magnified and put on the wall here by assistants. Projected, and then with the help of assistants, drawn with charcoal on the wall. And I felt that it was augmented image, but also augmented, almost microscopic touch. So when you draw, you are actually making a mark, but also micro-touching that small point of contact with his skin somehow. So it's augmented visually, but it's also augmented in the idea of the touch,
making.
the repeated touch and the making. And this drawing, I don't know if you notice, it's opposite to the drawings, the rubbings of the trees. So when I look at this small drawing augmented on the wall, it felt like also a landscape. It felt like a forest. Because you could see the airs, you could see it's quite a huge installation, and it's pretty much symmetrical positioning to the other room.
Oh, that's true.
And I felt, even leaving the exhibition, I felt that it was a body that they were kind of drawing with. Every time on the sides you had the branches going out, you had the trees, you had the leaves, but then inside you had the inside of the body, like you were saying. Center there was a face. If you imagine where that face was, opposite to it there was the first work that we saw with the eyes closed. So you could imagine that in front of that face there was that piece with centered as well. So exactly centered with that sculpture with the eyes closed. And then going out again, there was the time that it's relative, right? It was the time that you were there, that some artists can do that to you as well, to make it bigger, make it smaller. You don't know, you lose track of time. It could have been a long time that you stayed in the show, maybe not that long. So, and going back to your day, to your time.
And the muses that in that quote of Socrates, the work that we didn't like that much, at the same time, it kind of makes sense when you think about his references. And it's also very beautiful that it makes us think of a lot of animation. I mean, from Miyazaki to more obscure for us, obviously, not for our kids, that we've watched recently on Netflix, like Scavenger's Reign. So in some ways, and I always say this in the podcast, what you like, what you don't like, we are limited by our own education and our own tastes. And it's also great to feel when we converse with someone that you can kind of overcome that limitation and understand that maybe the resonance of a work with meaningful experiences might be more important than your being a bit shocked by the kitschy aspect of a work. And you helped a lot in the way you were talking about the exhibition as a body and kind of seeing the correspondences of all the works together. That was quite great. But yeah, thank you. I think we've come to the end of the road. I think there was the problem is that there's still so much that I wanted to say.
Absolutely, same, and developing ideas as well. I felt that I had to jump to another one quite quickly, but thank you also for inviting me and for your podcast. It's making me going to more exhibitions lately. Thank you for that as well.
So this episode was recorded on the 27th of April 2025. Our research assistant was Sehej Malik and the music is by Sartan. Thank you so much for sticking with us. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Have a good one. Until the next time. Exhibitionistas is an indie podcast with its perks and its productive challenges. But I'm very thankful to be in your eardrums or somewhere in your screens. Don't forget to support independent content. Give us a nice rating, subscribe to the newsletter, and if you can, click on the show's notes or go to our website and buy us a latte. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for listening. Have a good one.